The morning mist still clung to the low valley surrounding Alex Mason's ranch as he stood at the window, sipping his coffee. A retired Navy SEAL, Alex had traded the noise of combat for the quiet solitude of the open plains. His ranch, a sprawling stretch of land, was as isolated as it was peaceful, perfect for someone trying to outrun the ghosts of war. The only visitors were the occasional ranchers from neighboring plots or the rare delivery truck. But today, the stillness was shattered. From the corner of his eye, Alex spotted the dust cloud rising down the long gravel driveway. It was far too early for anyone to be passing through, and the convoy of 4 black SUVs with tinted windows only confirmed his suspicions. Something was wrong. He squinted, setting his coffee cup down. His training kicked in. Every part of his body went still, alert to the unfamiliar. Whoever these people were, they weren't here for a friendly visit. As the convoy rolled to a stop at his front gate, Alex moved silently, his years of experience on military operations helping him stay hidden in plain sight. He crouched low beside the window, adjusting the angle so he could get a better view of the approaching figures. They moved with purpose, stepping out of their vehicles in sync. The uniforms they wore, official-looking, dark green with a patch reading HOA enforcement, were strange. Alex had lived here long enough to know that the HOA had no such enforcers, not in this rural area. The leader of the group, a tall man with sharp features and a cold expression, took a step forward. His eyes scanned the land around them, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't here to discuss property codes. Something in the man's gaze felt predatory, like a wolf sizing up its prey. The others followed his lead, their movements precise but distant, their eyes scanning the property like they were looking for something or someone. Alex's hand instinctively reached for the M1911 pistol holstered under his jacket. It wasn't that he expected to need it, but his training never let him be unprepared. These weren't just overzealous bureaucrats or law-abiding neighbors. He could feel the tension in the air, the faint hum of danger just beyond the surface. The leader approached his porch, a folder in hand. Alex stayed still, watching. The man knocked once, then twice. The sound was deliberate, heavy, as if it was meant to unsettle him. "Mr. Mason," the leader called, his voice smooth, yet commanding. "We have some business to discuss. I'm Officer Gregg from the HOA enforcement team. You're in violation of several property codes, and we need to address them immediately." Alex's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, eyes narrowing as he analyzed the situation. Something wasn't right. The HOA had no enforcement team, especially not one with such a heavy-handed approach. He hadn't received a single letter, warning, or fine. No mention of any property violations, yet here they were, threatening him with the full force of their authority. "Mr. Mason," Gregg called again, his tone now tinged with impatience. Alex hesitated. He could walk away, ignore them. But his instincts told him that if he did, it might be the last time he had the chance to make a choice. The air felt thick with hidden threats, and for the first time in years, Alex felt the weight of something dangerous creeping closer to his door. Alex stood motionless, his eyes locked on the group outside, and his mind raced through all the possibilities. What kind of game were they playing? The way the leader, Officer Gregg, called his name again, more urgent this time, sent a cold chill down Alex's spine. These weren't just people delivering notices. This felt like a warning, a challenge. He stepped to the door, cracking it open just enough to speak. "I'm listening," Alex said, his voice calm but sharp, the way it used to be when he was in charge of military operations. Gregg smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only an icy calculation. He stepped forward, holding up a clipboard, the paper's edges neatly pressed as if rehearsed. He didn't wait for Alex to invite him further in, instead giving him an almost predatory look. "Mr. Mason, as I said, you're in violation of several local HOA codes," Gregg began, scanning the clipboard dramatically before looking Alex square in the eye. "We've sent multiple notices to your address, but it seems you've ignored them." Alex tilted his head, trying to suppress the rising anger. "I've received nothing." Greg's eyes narrowed, the smile still plastered on his face. "You're on the record as having received all prior notices. And now, unfortunately, we need to take action. The violations are serious." He handed Alex the clipboard with a flourish. Alex glanced down at the page, but the list of alleged violations was vague at best. Unapproved construction, land use not compliant, and something about excessive debris. It all sounded absurd. "You're out here trying to find me for what?" Alex asked, voice low and steady. "This is my land, and I've never heard a word about any of these so-called violations. You've got no right to be here, and no papers to back it up." Greg's face didn't flicker. "If you refuse to comply," he said, his voice suddenly colder, "we'll issue fines. Substantial ones. The kind that can force you to sell or lose your property. And you don't want that, do you?" Alex's blood ran cold at the mention of losing his property. He'd worked hard for everything here, his sanctuary. And suddenly, the peaceful life he'd fought so hard to build felt as fragile as glass. "You're not getting anything from me," Alex said, his voice firm, but his eyes scanning the group of enforcers now quietly moving around his yard, setting up markers near the fence and the barn. They were methodical, as though they'd done this before, only they didn't expect resistance. Greg seemed unfazed by Alex's response. "We'll see about that," he replied with a grim smile. "If you don't resolve this, we'll have no choice but to escalate. The next step will involve the authorities." Alex's mind sharpened, his SEAL instincts kicking in. Something wasn't right. The way Greg spoke, like a man used to getting exactly what he wanted, felt like a warning in itself, and that unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach grew stronger by the second. There was more to this than a simple property dispute. This was about control, and perhaps far worse than just the HOA. As Alex scanned the group, he caught a glimpse of something out of place. One of the men, a hulking figure with dark sunglasses, was walking toward the barn, his movements stiff, deliberate. He wasn't following the supposed protocol. He was checking something, or someone. Without a word, Alex stepped back inside, his mind working fast. If these were just enforcers looking for compliance, they wouldn't have split up. This wasn't just about paperwork or code violations. It was a game of intimidation, and Alex had no intention of losing. The door clicked shut behind him, and he silently moved toward his gear. This was far from over. The door clicked shut behind Alex, the metallic sound echoing in the stillness of the house. His pulse quickened, but his mind stayed steady, focused. There was something undeniably off about the entire situation. He wasn't just dealing with a bunch of rogue HOA enforcers. No, this was something much darker, far more calculated. Alex moved through his home like a shadow, his senses sharpening with each passing second. The enforcers outside were too organized, too practiced in their movements. And the way Greg had spoken, calm, yet laced with a quiet menace, told Alex everything he needed to know. These men weren't here to enforce property codes. They were here for something else, something far more dangerous. The house was silent except for the muffled sounds of the enforcers outside, still marking his property, setting up whatever operation they had in mind. Alex's eyes darted to the gear locker in the corner of the living room. It was time. He pulled on his old tactical vest, the familiar weight of the armor offering him a sense of calm. His fingers moved with practiced ease, selecting the tools he would need. A combat knife, a silenced pistol, a few flashbangs for good measure. The last thing he needed was for the situation to escalate before he knew what he was dealing with. He'd fought countless enemies in his career, but this felt different. This wasn't a skirmish with foreign insurgents. This was something insidious, a threat buried deeper than just his land. As he moved to the back window, Alex crouched low and peered through the blinds. His eyes scanned the group, watching them work with eerie precision. The figure by the barn caught his attention again. The man's posture was rigid, too deliberate, as if he were searching for something buried deep in the ground. Alex's gut tightened. That wasn't part of any normal HOA inspection. His fingers itched for his weapon as he watched the enforcer kneel down by one of the markers. The man's movements were slow, almost ritualistic. And then, Alex saw it, a heavy metal object, partially exposed under the dirt, a container of some kind. Alex's mind raced. He had to get closer. He needed to know what they were looking for. But before he could make his move, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Mr. Mason, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Alex's head snapped up. Greg stood near the front gate, arms crossed, his expression one of controlled annoyance. The other enforcers paused in their tasks and turned to watch. Greg's eyes locked onto Alex, cold and calculating. "You don't want to make us come in there," Greg continued, his voice smooth, almost coaxing. "It would be in your best interest to comply now." Alex's heart beat faster, but his expression remained unchanged. "I don't take orders from men like you," he said, his voice low and steady. Greg's gaze flickered, his lips curling into a tight smile. "That's unfortunate, because we don't take no for an answer." The enforcers began to move closer, closing the distance between themselves and the house. Alex's mind was already calculating his next steps. There was no backing down now. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. As the group advanced, Alex saw the man by the barn give a subtle nod to Greg. The moment stretched out, every muscle in Alex's body tensed, ready for action. He couldn't let them get any closer, not without knowing what they were after. The stakes were higher than ever. He had to move. The tension in the air was palpable. Every step the enforcers took toward the house felt like a ticking clock, each second bringing them closer to an inevitable confrontation. Alex's mind raced, running through every scenario, every possible move he could make. His instincts screamed at him to act, but he had to be smart. He wasn't just fighting for his property anymore. He was fighting to uncover a conspiracy that went far deeper than he'd first realized. He pulled the blinds closed quietly, moving to the back door. The old wood creaked under his weight as he eased it open. He needed to get to the barn, to see for himself what the enforcers were looking for. There was no time to waste. His fingers brushed against the cold steel of the M1911 at his side, his heart sensing with the rhythm of his breath. With calculated precision, Alex slipped out into the brush, using the cover of the surrounding trees and tall grass to stay hidden. His boots were light on the ground, his movements silent as a shadow. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. His mind was focused entirely on the task ahead, discovering what these men were truly after and stopping them before they could complete their mission. He crept closer to the barn, his eyes scanning every movement. The enforcers were no longer focused on him. They were working in pairs, digging, setting up strange equipment, and communicating in hushed voices. At the far side of the barn, the man who had been kneeling earlier was now directing the others to dig in a precise location. There it was again, that unmistakable metallic gleam beneath the dirt. Alex's stomach tightened. Whatever it wasn't just a simple piece of equipment or leftover debris. This was deliberate. It was buried intentionally, and it meant something. The question was, what? Alex didn't have the luxury of time. He needed to act, and quickly. His hand moved instinctively to the knife sheathed at his side, the cold steel reassuring in his grip. The enforcers weren't paying attention to him yet, but that wouldn't last long. He had only moments before they'd realize he was gone. He moved with fluid grace, slipping behind a stack of crates just outside the barn. His eyes never left the scene, his mind working out his next move. He had to stop them from unearthing whatever was hidden in the ground, but he couldn't do it by force. Not yet. He needed to get closer, to listen, to gather more intel. From behind the crates, Alex could hear snippets of their conversation. Greg was giving orders, his voice sharp and commanding. "Get that thing out of the ground now. We need to make sure it's intact. No mistakes." Alex's heart skipped a beat. What was it? His mind raced, trying to piece the puzzle together. This wasn't just about fines or codes. There was something here they didn't want anyone to know. Alex knew it wasn't enough to stop them. He had to find out what they were trying to hide. Without warning, the man at the far end of the barn shouted, "We've got a problem." His voice was laced with panic. Alex's pulse quickened. The enforcers paused, alert, but Greg didn't seem worried. Instead, he straightened, fixing his gaze on the barn door. "We'll deal with it in a minute," Greg said, his tone cold and detached. "Make sure the package stays secure." The enforcer hesitated, but nodded. The word package echoed in Alex's mind, a heavy weight settling over him. Whatever they were after, whatever they had buried beneath his land, it was far more dangerous than a simple piece of property. The enforcers were getting closer to finishing their work. Alex had to move now or risk losing everything. Alex crouched low behind the crates, his breath steady but quickening as he watched the enforcers work. His mind churned, calculating the odds, trying to piece together the situation. There was no question about it now. This wasn't just a land dispute or HOA enforcement. These men weren't interested in codes or fines. They were after something far more valuable and dangerous than property. And whatever it was buried right under his barn. The man who had shouted earlier, a burly enforcer with a scar running down his cheek, had now joined Greg. The two stood together, speaking in low tones, eyes flicking toward the others who were digging around the strange, buried object. The rest of the team was still working, but the tension was thick in the air. Something had gone wrong. Something had broken their calm facade. The man with the scar turned toward the group, his eyes scanning the yard. Alex held his breath, hoping they hadn't spotted him. The man's gaze lingered for a moment, his instincts no doubt picking up on something out of place, but he quickly moved on, returning his attention to the task at hand. Alex seized the opportunity to move. He needed answers, and he needed to be closer to the dig site. Keeping low to the ground, he slipped around the perimeter of the barn, staying in the shadow of the tall walls. His muscles tensed with each step, every sense heightened to the smallest sound. He was moving silently, so silently it almost felt unnatural. But there was no room for mistakes. He reached the far side of the barn, closer now to the hole where the enforcers were working. From this angle, he could see the object they were trying to retrieve, a large metal crate, partially buried beneath the soil. It was covered in a thick layer of dirt, but its outline was unmistakable. The shape, the size, and the industrial strength of the container screamed military grade. Alex's heart raced as he considered the possibilities. Could it be a weapons cache? A hidden supply drop from one of the many covert operations he had been involved in. He'd seen all kinds of storage containers in his time, but none like this. The men surrounding it weren't acting like typical mercenaries. They were focused, disciplined. They weren't just looking to steal something. They were retrieving something important, something worth all this effort. Greg and the scar-faced man were getting closer now, speaking in tight, clipped sentences. "Move faster," Greg snapped. "We need to secure it before he realizes what's going on." Alex's blood ran cold. He realizes they weren't talking about a generic threat. They were talking about him. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed through the air, a noise unmistakable to Alex's trained ears. The lock on the container had been undone. The sound was followed by the low groan of metal sliding across metal as the heavy doors of the crate began to open. Alex's breath caught in his throat. This was it. Whatever lay inside that crate was about to be exposed, and the enforcers were dangerously close to uncovering it. Without hesitation, Alex surged forward. His body moved like a coiled spring, and in an instant, he was up and over the edge of the barn, coming down hard on the nearest enforcer. The man barely had time to react before Alex slammed him to the ground, one swift, precise strike to the neck disabling him instantly. Greg turned just in time to see the chaos erupt. His eyes widened in surprise, but the moment of hesitation was all Alex needed. He darted toward the crate, his hand already reaching for the edge to see what was inside. Before he could reach it, Greg's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Take him down. Now." The enforcers sprang into action, but Alex was already in motion. The storm had begun. The air crackled with tension as the enforcers closed in on Alex. He'd expected a fight, but the sheer speed with which they moved toward him caught him off guard. They were organized, trained, too well trained for mere HOA lackeys. These weren't just any thugs. These men had military experience too. Alex didn't hesitate. His years of combat training had ingrained every move into muscle memory. And now, with the enforcers charging at him, he acted on pure instinct. A swift sidestep allowed him to avoid the first man's lunge, and in the same motion, Alex grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back and using his momentum to throw him into another enforcer, knocking them both to the ground. "Get him!" Greg shouted from behind, his voice sharp and commanding. Alex didn't look back. He had one goal now, to get to the crate. His instincts told him that whatever was inside it could change everything, maybe even explain why these men were here in the first place. He dodged another enforcer's swing, ducking low and driving his shoulder into the man's midsection. The impact sent them both sprawling onto the ground. Alex's foot collided with the enforcer's side, sending him sprawling. But Alex didn't waste time. He was already on his feet, moving toward the crate with determination in his eyes. As he reached the metal container, he could feel the weight of the enforcers behind him, moving faster, getting closer. Time was running out. Alex grabbed the heavy lid and wrenched it open, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, there were rows of documents, tightly packed folders sealed in plastic, their contents presumably classified. But it wasn't just paper. A sleek black device, about the size of a large tablet, rested in the center of the crate. Its surface was covered with a series of strange markings, symbols that Alex couldn't recognize, but his gut told him it wasn't anything good. "Hold it right there," Greg's voice barked. Alex spun around just as Greg lunged for him. The enforcer leader's hand reached for his arm, but Alex was already several steps ahead. He sidestepped, pivoting on his heel, and lashed out with a swift kick that sent Greg tumbling backward. The other enforcers weren't far behind. They rushed at Alex from all sides, forcing him to make split-second decisions. He grabbed the nearest enforcer by the collar and threw him into the path of the oncoming group, causing them to collide with each other in a heap. Alex wasted no time, spinning on his heel and launching himself into the fray again. But then, a voice cut through the chaos. Calm, yet ominous. "Enough." Alex froze, his body instinctively tensing at the sound of the voice. It was not Greg. This was someone else. A new presence had arrived, one that exuded power and authority. From the shadows of the barn, a tall, broad figure stepped forward. His face was obscured by the brim of his military-grade helmet, but the insignia on his armor told Alex everything he needed to know. This was no ordinary enforcer. This was someone with real power. Someone above Greg. Greg, clearly rattled by the sudden interruption, straightened himself and took a step back. His eyes flicked nervously toward the newcomer, as though waiting for instructions. Alex's grip tightened on the black device in the crate. This was bad. This was much worse than a group of rogue enforcers. Whoever was in charge now had the kind of presence that signaled far more than just a land grab. "Get the device," the man ordered in a low, gravelly voice, "and deal with Mason." The enforcers moved with renewed purpose, but Alex's mind was already racing. This was no longer just about stopping a few goons. This was about protecting something bigger. something that could have consequences on a scale he couldn't even begin to imagine. He glanced at the black device one last time. It was his only lead. And now, it was also his greatest target. The man in the military-grade armor stepped forward with deadly calm. His eyes, cold and unblinking, locked onto Alex, sizing him up as though he were nothing more than an obstacle in his path. The enforcers around them adjusted their stances, their movements now coordinated, systematic, like a well-oiled machine. Alex knew instantly that this wasn't some low-tier mercenary group. These men were the real deal, and they were far more dangerous than anything he'd anticipated. Alex's grip tightened around the black device in the crate, his mind racing. The situation had escalated beyond anything he could have predicted. They weren't just after his ranch. They were after something so valuable, so secretive, that these enforcers would stop at nothing to get it. What's inside that crate? Alex demanded, his voice low, but charged with anger. He didn't care anymore. The enforcers were already closing in, but the truth was more important. He needed to know what they were after, and why. The man in armor didn't answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Alex like a puzzle. "You're a Navy SEAL," he said flatly, his voice mechanical. "I can tell by the way you move. That's going to make things more complicated for you." Alex gritted his teeth. "Who the hell are you?" The man stepped closer, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "I'm someone you don't need to know, but you're in my way." He gave a slight nod, and immediately, the enforcers moved forward, closing the gap between them and Alex. Alex didn't flinch. The thought of fighting these men head-on didn't faze him. He'd survived worse. But the device in the crate was the game changer. He needed it. In a split second, Alex dropped low, rolling out of the way as two enforcers lunged toward him. He grabbed the nearest one by the legs and swept him off his feet, sending the man crashing to the dirt. He quickly regained his footing, but the others were already on him. The man in armor raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. "No more games. Secure him." A team of enforcers descended on Alex, their movements swift and controlled. Alex fought back, but he could feel the pressure mounting. There were too many of them. With each movement, he could sense their precision, their skill. They weren't just trying to neutralize him. They were methodical, ensuring every step was calculated to keep him from the crate. The black device had to be protected. Alex's mind raced, his training kicking in. He knew that in situations like this, when every second counted, he had to outthink them, not just outfight them. His eyes flicked to the barn door, the open space beyond it. He could escape, but that meant abandoning the device, and he couldn't afford that. He glanced at the crates nearby, his mind calculating his next move. In a single fluid motion, he lunged toward the nearest stack of crates, pulling a heavy metal bar free from the side. The enforcers tried to close in, but Alex swung it with deadly precision, knocking two men to the ground. Greg, still hovering near the back, barked orders, his voice tinged with desperation. "Don't let him out of the barn. The device must stay here." It was all coming to a head. Alex was running out of time. His eyes landed on the device again, just a few feet away, gleaming in the dim light of the barn. Every instinct told him to run, but he couldn't. With a sharp intake of breath, Alex made his decision. It wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about taking control, taking the fight to them. He hurled the metal bar across the barn, hitting a stack of crates with a crash that sent the enforcers into a momentary frenzy of confusion. In that instant, Alex dashed toward the crate, grabbing the black device. He was halfway to the exit when the figure in armor moved. "Don't!" The man's voice rang out, now tinged with something more. Rage. It was a warning. But Alex had already made his move. The gamble had begun. Alex's pulse hammered in his ears as he bolted for the barn door. The black device clutched tightly in his hands. The enforcers surged forward, but he had the advantage of surprise and speed. The barn door loomed just ahead, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like freedom, an escape from the chaos that had consumed his ranch. But the man in the armored suit wasn't far behind. His voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Stop him. Now." Alex didn't need to turn around to know the enforcers were on his tail. He could hear the pounding of boots against the dirt, the frantic urgency in their pursuit. But he wasn't about to be cornered again. He reached the barn door, slammed it open, and dashed into the open yard, his legs pumping harder as adrenaline surged through him. He couldn't risk stopping. Not yet. With every step, Alex could hear the enforcers closing the gap, but his military training kicked in. He wasn't just running. He was planning his next move. The barn door was too small to cover him now, and the open land beyond was a clear shot for the men after him. But that's when he saw it. The fence line, a good 100 yards away, leading to the far edge of his property. He sprinted toward it, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his mind was calm, calculating. Behind him, the enforcers shouted, their voices filled with desperation. They were too close. Alex knew he had only moments before they had him surrounded. Then a shot rang out. Alex flinched as the bullet zipped past his ear. The crack of the gunshot echoed across the ranch. He glanced behind him and saw the figure in the armored suit, standing still, his gun now aimed directly at Alex. The man's calm demeanor hadn't faltered, even in the midst of the chaos, but it was clear he wasn't playing around anymore. "Drop the device," the man shouted. His voice was ice cold, each word weighted with authority. Alex's eyes locked onto the black device in his hand. He could feel the weight of it now, not just physically, but in the gravity of the situation. He could almost sense the danger it posed, the secrets it contained, secrets that could bring everything crashing down. But Alex wasn't just going to give it up. Not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. He'd fought too hard, too long, to let this slip away. He pushed himself harder, his feet pounding the dirt as he neared the fence. Another shot rang out, this time closer, grazing the side of his leg. Pain shot through him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught his eye. It was one of the enforcers. He was positioned at the corner of the barn, aiming a rifle at Alex's back. Alex's heart pounded, his instincts screaming at him to take action. With a well-timed roll, Alex dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the shot. He came up on one knee, swinging his arm around with deadly precision and hurling a metal object from the ground at the enforcer's face. The man crumpled instantly, dropping his rifle. The path ahead was clear for a moment. Alex pushed through the pain in his leg, heading straight for the fence line. He was almost there. The gate. Freedom. Escape. Just as he reached the fence, a hand grabbed his arm, spinning him around. The man in the armored suit was there, closer than ever. "You're not getting away," the man snarled, his grip tightening. But Alex was faster. With a swift twist, he broke free, launching himself over the fence and into the thick brush beyond. The moment he hit the ground, he was already moving, running deeper into the woods. Behind him, the enforcers shouted, but they weren't close enough to stop him. Alex didn't slow down. The device was still in his hands, still a mystery that needed to be solved. But there was no way he was letting them take it back. Not without answers. Hours later, after the adrenaline had faded and his muscles screamed in exhaustion, Alex found himself hidden deep in the woods, away from the prying eyes of those who sought to control him. The night was quiet now, and the device in his hand felt heavier than ever. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a sense of clarity. The game had changed, and now he was in control.